Hi, I'm Ruth Weisberg, and this video artist talk surveys my exhibition held at the Norton Simon Museum in the fall of 2008 and the winter of 2009. It was called Ruth Weisberg, Guido Cagnacci, and the Resonant Image, because it was a kind of conversation between myself and Baroque artist Guido Cagnacci. This painting behind me is the inspiration for a body of work that I have worked on for the past 3 years, and it is from the Baroque period. It was done in 1660 by an Italian artist who was at that point in Vienna. The title of this painting is Martha Rebuking Mary for Her Vanity. And we see Mary Magdalene, and she's taken off all her finery and she's torn off her jewelry, and her sister, Martha, is rebuking her. Then we see the figure of virtue chasing out the devil or vice. There's another two figures, very interesting pairing of two women. One looks very sympathetic, the other looks very critical. They are kind of like a Greek chorus reacting to this story that's unfolding in front of them. This is a very theatrical painting, somewhat enigmatic, a very original composition, and in the 3 years that I used it as a source of inspiration, I did not run out of things to react to and things to say. It was really a wonderful and profound source of inspiration. This painting was not the first painting I did inspired by Guido Cagnacci's painting, but it is the most complete statement. And you can compare both the similarities and the differences. I have not copied the other painting, I have reenacted it, primarily using family members, my son, his wife, myself, and we are doing something a little different because I do not have the same belief system as Guido. I am living in the 21st century, and he was a 17th century Catholic man. I'm Jewish. This makes for some distinct differences. For example, I've changed the rebuke into a blessing, and I've also gotten rid of the devil because this is more about virtue than it is about vice. I've worked in 3 different media for this exhibition: paintings, drawings, and monotypes. This is a drawing. It is rather large scale. It's not an intimate drawing. It's a drawing that kind of competes with paintings in terms of its size. It is also very experimental in terms of technique. It uses materials that I have been experimenting with over the last 20 years. I use charcoal, wax, and graphite dust. What this allows me to do is to have both a linear description of the figures, but also it allows me to be very atmospheric. The graphite dust gives you a kind of veil of darkness. And at the same time, you can open it up and have a feeling of the light transfusing the image. The figures are taken from the main figures in the Cagnacci, Martha and Mary Magdalene, but I have replaced them with myself and my daughter-in-law. Guido was only interested in beautiful young women. Every woman in his painting is of a certain age, and I am much more interested in the process of aging and maybe a difference in age between the two figures. You know, is this a mother and a daughter? Is it a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law? You kind of get to decide how you want to interpret the relationship of these two figures. This painting is called La Città Ideale, which means the ideal city. I focus principally on the central figure of Mary Magdalene, as was depicted in the pose that's depicted in the Guido Cagnacci. I include this still life, her slippers, the pearls, and I add a reference to an earlier Italian era, Renaissance era, followers of Piero della Francesco, who did a series of paintings called La Città Ideale, which refers to a kind of utopian idea of the city. And the thing that pulls these diverse elements together, I think, is a sense of how much they are an apparition. In other words, there's a kind of ephemeral quality both to the background and to the figure. She's there, she's appearing, but she might disappear. And this sense of an image being part of a kind of fleeting world, I think, is at the very core of all of my work. The sense of impermanence and wanting to hold on to things that are disappearing is really a very fundamental part of why I paint. This painting is kind of the apotheosis of virtue, and I've taken it down to the three essential figures, this kind of pyramid structure of the two sisters and then the figure of virtue. The two sisters are both posed for by my daughter-in-law, Laura, and I like that sense of, is it the same person or is it a different person? One of the things about the painting that I'm reacting to is it's very clear to me that the same model posed for both Martha and Mary. So this question about, is this a different person, is it a sister, is it the same person, I think is one that's very fruitful and kind of interesting to contemplate. The figure of virtue is really transcendent and going into a sedimented solvent wash. Technically, what I do when I paint is that I often start with the canvas on the floor, and on a gessoed surface, I will lay down solvent washes. This is very similar to how one can work in lithography, for instance, and so my background as a printmaker has really informed my current practice as a painter. I was so stunned by how the solvent settled for this particular canvas that I spent about 3 weeks with it up in my studio without being able to add a line to it. I just felt like it was a miracle. The wings that I had wanted to emerge out of the wash are really there, and the figures are in the exact right place as far as I'm concerned. This is one of 8 monotypes in this exhibition. It's really one of my favorite techniques, and it involves drawing and painting on a non-porous surface and then running that image through a press, so you have ink pressed on a damp piece of paper. It has a luminosity that is quite unique, and it's a wonderful technique, although it's a tough one because you only have about 5 hours to draw and then print if you're working, for instance, with oil paints or printing inks, which is what I use. I also like to roll on my color, often with more than one color on the roller. This is called sometimes a split fountain. This is a good example of that. And then the whites are wiped out and the darks are added. So again, I'm going for something very atmospheric, and the shading, the chiaroscuro, becomes a very important part of the message. You know, where does the light hit, and what kind of mood or feeling does it reveal? This is the last painting in the series. After spending literally years in the dark space of the original painting, I was tempted to kind of free the figure to go out into that beautiful terrace. I also have realized that over and over again in my work, I use the figure of a departing woman. And so this figure, who is not frontal, the way we often see figures, or even 3/4, but really turned away and then glancing backwards. I think it's very powerful, that combination of the departing figure and the glance backwards. In terms of the departing figure, we have a kind of dissolving of form. You know, she really merges into the background. And then we get this little glance backward of her eye. I'm so glad that you have joined me, and we've taken this somewhat abbreviated tour of my exhibition here at the Norton Simon. It's been wonderful to have it up, and I am delighted that there's going to be this record of it going on into the future.